Hi, my name is Avania Straoud, the daughter my family once called too fragile to handle responsibility. But fragile daughters do not walk into a Sunday lunch, only to discover their name has been erased from every single deed and trust. They told me I was sensitive, that I should leave the heavy lifting to my sister Kalista. But when I opened that folder, the truth screamed louder than their lies. My father's signature, faked. The house, the company, the land, all signed away behind my back. And when I confronted them, my sister leaned close, smiled, and whispered, "You're lucky I even let you show up today." If your own blood laughed while cutting you out of everything you helped build, would you stay silent, or would you fight to take it all back? Before we dive in, share in the comments what city you're watching from. I read them all. And if stories of family betrayal and justice speak to you, make sure to subscribe so you never miss the next one. Thank you for supporting this channel. It was a Sunday in early spring. When I found out my family had thrown a party without me, I was coming back from a client site south of Dallas. When I drove past my parents' house on Timberleaf Drive, balloons drifted lazily in the breeze, cars lined both sides of the curb, and a professionally printed banner read, "Celebrating our pillar Kalista's 10 years leading Bundy Freight." Kalista. Not our parents. Not the family. Just her. I parked 2 houses down and sat still behind the wheel. I didn't know what stung more. The fact that I hadn't been invited, or the fact that I wasn't surprised. Growing up, I used to believe things would balance out, that hard work would eventually be noticed, that if I just kept showing up, helping, making the right choices, I'd finally matter. But lately, being invisible wasn't just a passing phase. It felt brutally intentional. I drove away before someone spotted me. At home, I pulled out a plastic bin of old keepsakes, ones I'd been meaning to organize, mostly yellowed report cards, faded ticket stubs, a friendship bracelet from 3rd grade. But near the bottom, I found the silver hairpin, engraved with a single letter, E. My mother gave it to me for my 16th birthday. She'd said, "As long as you wear it, I'll always see you as strong." At the time, it made me feel like I mattered, that she truly saw me. Now, I wasn't so sure. I put it back in its velvet pouch, slid it under some winter sweaters, not ready to decide what to do with that yet. That night, while reheating leftover chili, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me said to answer. "Avania," a male voice said. "This is Gerald Hellbrook. I was your parents' estate attorney. Was. I'm sorry to call out of the blue, but I've been meaning to follow up on the trust transition paperwork. You never returned your copy." I frowned. "What paperwork?" There was a pause. "It was sent 3 months ago, certified mail, to your apartment address in Garland." "I never received anything," I said. "Would you have a moment to meet in person?" he asked. "I think we need to review a few things together." The next morning, I went to the post office. The clerk checked the forwarding history on my mailbox. Apparently, my name had been temporarily removed, due to a change of service form signed digitally by my sister. "I'm sorry," the woman said. "It says the address was updated to Kalista Bundy's name only." I didn't respond, just nodded, and walked back to my car, my ears ringing. I showed up at Mr. Hellbrook's office by noon. He greeted me with a wary look, led me to a quiet conference room with blinds drawn halfway. "I want to be clear," he began. "What I'm showing you today is based on your parents' most recent instructions, but it may surprise you." He laid a copy of the current trust documents on the table. The signatures were real. The notary seal was there. My parents had legally signed over every piece of family property, land, and company share, to Kalista. "All of it," I whispered. "I know this is difficult," he said. But I thought you'd seen this before. I shook my head slowly. Mr. Helbrook, in the older version, was I included? He nodded. Yes, as co-beneficiary. That version is still in our records. Unless they formally revoked it, it should still... He paused, stood up, and walked over to his safe. With careful hands, he removed a cream envelope, thick, sealed with a gold sticker. This, he said, was meant for you. It's dated 6 months before the new documents. Your parents dropped it off themselves. I stared at it, suddenly aware of how cold my hands felt. Why didn't I ever get this? He sighed. Your sister picked it up the day you were supposed to. Said she'd deliver it. Of course she did. I broke the seal with a slow rip, unfolded the letter inside. My eyes scanned the first line, and my stomach dropped. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath, until the page trembled in my hand. The letter inside that envelope. It wasn't just sentimental, it was legal. A notarized copy of the original trust document, clear as day, naming me as 50% co-owner of our parents' real estate and their retirement fund, dated 14 months ago, my mother's signature, my father's too. And then, in the margin, a neat sticky note in Mr. Helbrook's handwriting. For Avania, copy retained. I sat in stunned silence, as he quietly stood up to give me a moment. 14 months ago. That was before Kalista moved back into the house after her second divorce. Before the sudden weekly family dinners I was no longer invited to. Before I started wondering if I was slowly being pushed out. Or if I'd simply started fading on my own. I'll give you time with it, Mr. Helbrook said, gently placing a glass of water beside me. Take it home. And, Avania, don't rush to respond. Process first. I thanked him, the words barely forming as I drove home. The letter sat on the passenger seat like a heavy weight. My fingers kept twitching, itching to call someone. But who? My parents? My sister Kalista? I wasn't ready to scream. Not yet. At home, I sat on the edge of my couch, letter still in hand, and did something I hadn't done in years. I cried. Not the kind of sobbing that comes from heartbreak, but that hollow, cold cry that comes when you realize something wasn't an accident. It was a choice, a strategy, a deliberate decision you weren't even invited to weigh in on. In between tears, I started writing down numbers. I'd been the one helping them pay off the second mortgage after the market crash. $78,300 in all, across 6 long years. That included the emergency plumbing, the new roof, and the surprise property tax bill in 2020. Every time I'd helped, my mother called it a family favor. Apparently, those favors didn't come with a seat at the table. Later that afternoon, I drove out to my dad's mechanic shop. The place looked just as it had for 20 years. Same corrugated siding, same squeaky front doorbell. I hadn't visited in months. Dad was sitting behind the counter, flipping through invoices. He looked up and gave me a polite, neutral smile. No warmth, just recognition. Didn't expect you today at all, he said. I shrugged. Thought I'd stop by, just to say hi. The air was thick with motor oil and distance. My eyes drifted to the back wall, the founder's plaque we had installed 10 years ago. I'd designed it myself. It used to list my name beside Kalista's under our parents. But now, the gold strip under Founders had only 3 names. Mine was gone. I walked closer, pretending to admire the shine. Was the plaque updated recently? He didn't look up. Kalista's been helping more lately. She's truly earned it, he replied. I bit the inside of my cheek hard. So, erasing someone's name now counts as a promotion, right? He shrugged. You moved out. You're doing your own thing, aren't you? My own thing. Paying their mortgage. Managing logistics across 5 states. Living without recognition. I walked out before I said something I couldn't take back. That evening, back home, I sat at my kitchen table and pulled up the Dallas County Clerk's online portal. I typed in my parents' address, clicked through the deed history. There it was. 3 months ago, the house had been legally transferred to Kalista Bundy. No mention of joint owner, no trust, just a clean, quiet change. And then I found the second document, the transfer of our father's share in the family warehouse lot, also to Kalista. No announcement, no discussion. So that's why the lawyer reached out. Legally, he had to notify anyone listed in a previous trust before the change could be finalized. They hadn't forgotten me. They'd tried to hide it. I walked outside, the estate document still in my hand, the edges crumpling under my grip. The sky was turning pink as the sun dipped behind the neighbor's chimney. I sat down on the curb, right near the mailbox, and looked at my name in the letter again. Clear, formal, valid. They erased me on paper, I muttered aloud, because they thought I wouldn't fight back. My phone buzzed in my lap. A message from Kalista. Don't make this messy. You were never meant to have it anyway. That line wasn't just cruel. It confirmed everything. And it lit a fire in me. I stared at that message from Kalista until the screen dimmed. Not from shock. I'd already been through that. But from something colder, heavier. Resignation mixed with resolve. I didn't sleep much that night. I laid in bed with the lamp on, rereading the trust papers, the text, and my notes. And I made a decision. Sunday morning rolled in with the same bright Texas sun that had warmed my childhood. Except now, it felt surgical. I didn't do my hair. I didn't wear perfume. I didn't even bother with the deviled eggs my mom always expected me to bring. Instead, I picked up a store-bought pie and a bottle of cheap red wine. No handwritten note, no love baked in, just enough to fulfill the unspoken requirement of bring something. Their driveway was already packed by the time I pulled up. A few of the church friends I recognized were milling about in pastel cardigans and floral blouses, chatting with Kalista near the door. She looked like she'd stepped out of a Southern lifestyle magazine. Hair curled, dress fitted, laughter just loud enough to command attention. I waited until the conversation shifted before approaching. Kalista turned, smiled tightly. "Oh, you actually made it today." I nodded, handing her the pie. "Store was out of your favorite one, so I improvised." She took it with a manicured hand, eyes flicking to my outfit. Plain slacks and a navy blouse. Nothing to critique, nothing to praise. Neutral. Inside, the house smelled like garlic rolls and rose air freshener. Familiar, but sterile. My mother was in the kitchen, directing a teenager I didn't know around the serving trays, probably a church volunteer. She saw me and clasped her hands together. "It's so nice to have both my girls here," she cooed, eyes lingering on Kalista, especially the one who's been here through thick and thin. I swallowed. Not anger, not hurt, just data. A line filed away in the growing case folder in my mind. Lunch was buffet style. I served myself last, took the smallest portion, and made my way toward the corner armchair. But Kalista gestured to the dining room. "We saved you a seat right at the big table," she said, voice sugar-coated. "Just for today," Mom chimed in behind her. "You've always preferred the couch, though." I sat at the adult table, not out of pride, but strategy. Small talk buzzed around us, retirement plans, choir rehearsals, Kalista's charity work. And then, with a clink of her glass, she stood. "I just wanted to sincerely thank everyone for supporting my brand new initiative," she said, beaming. "The Kalista Grace Foundation for Women in Recovery." Applause, camera flashes, my mother dabbing her eyes. "The startup funds came directly from the estate," Kalista added casually. "My parents truly believe in what I am doing, and I am deeply honored to carry the family legacy forward." I stared at my wineglass. Red droplets clung to the rim like evidence. That money, part of it was mine, or was supposed to be. After lunch, I began gathering dishes like I always had. My hands moved on autopilot, collecting forks, carefully stacking plates. But just as I reached for the last glass, my father appeared beside me. "Don't worry about it anymore. Kalista's got it now." Like I was an intern whose contract had ended. "Of course she does," I said softly as I turned. Kalista leaned in, breath warm against my ear. "You're lucky I even let you come today, you know." That was it. I needed to breathe. I needed space. I excused myself and headed down the hallway. To the guest bathroom, the one I'd painted for them 6 years ago during Mom's recovery. Still smelled faintly like lavender sachets and pine sol. I locked the door, stared at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back looked tired, not from age, but from effort unnoticed. Flashes came, images, not memories. The time I sold my vintage camera collection to cover Kalista's DUI attorney. The Christmas I skipped Maui because Dad needed new tires. The way Mom had cried when I gave her a used Toyota after her surgery. And how she told everyone at church it was Kalista's idea. I opened the cabinet to grab tissue, and noticed a thick envelope tucked between old coupons and expired Tylenol. My gut clenched. I pulled it out. It was an invitation. Cream cardstock with gold edges. Founder's dinner. Honoring Kalista Grace Bundy as sole legacy bearer of the Bundy family vision. The date, next month. I sat on the toilet lid, reading it again. They were throwing a banquet, on family funds, to celebrate rewriting history, to toast her, for stealing what I built. And they weren't even subtle anymore. I flushed the toilet without using it, washed my hands slowly, and opened the door. Kalista stood in the hall, chatting with someone about guest lists, and chicken or beef. I walked right past her. No pause, no confrontation, just a whisper. "I hope you enjoy the last meal where no one dares question your lies." I didn't wait for a reaction. I didn't need it, because I wasn't going to scream, I wasn't going to cry, but I was going to change everything, one document at a time. The next morning came with no alarm. I was already awake. I had barely slept, but I didn't feel tired, just focused. It was a strange kind of clarity, the kind you only get when there's nothing left to lose. I called in a personal day from work, telling my supervisor, I need to handle some urgent family paperwork. I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. After a quick coffee and a moment to check that the documents were still in my tote bag, I headed downtown. The drive to the county courthouse was quiet. No radio, just the hum of the road and my own pulse in my ears. The line at the records office was mercifully short. I filled out the form for public property records, feeling the sweat bead under my shirt as I wrote my name. I handed it over with a polite smile, then sat down to wait. 10 minutes later, a clerk called me up and slid a folder across the counter. Inside were the recent deeds and legal filings tied to our family properties, including the lake house up in Cedar Ridge. That house had always been a dream. My father's father built it by hand. And every summer growing up, it was where we escaped Texas heat and family tension. I used to believe, if we were ever going to heal, it would happen by that lake. But the paper in my hand said otherwise. There it was, a quit-claim deed, dated just 3 months back, transferring the title solely to Kalista, signed, notarized, stamped. At first glance it seemed legitimate, but then I saw it. The signature line, Ronald C. Bundy. The loops were off, the slant was wrong. It was almost, but not quite, his writing. I didn't need a handwriting expert to tell me what I already knew. I'd seen that signature before, years ago, on a field trip release form. When Dad had been in Houston on a work job, Mom had signed it, mumbling, he'd probably say yes anyway. Back then, I thought it was harmless. Now, I wasn't so sure. I printed 2 copies, placed them gently in my folder, and left the building with a numb sort of calm. I didn't rush. I didn't text anyone. Instead, I called Mr. Ledbetter, our family's former estate attorney. He'd retired 2 years ago, but still kept a home office on McKinn Avenue. When I told him what I'd found, he hesitated, but agreed to see me that afternoon. The moment I walked into his sunlit study, I felt 12 years old again, holding Dad's hand during a will update. Mr. Ledbetter had that kind of presence. Firm, quiet, trustworthy. He listened carefully. Didn't interrupt once as I laid out the documents. Then he picked up the deed, adjusted his glasses, and frowned. "This signature here, it's off," he muttered. I nodded. "I think it was forged, directly by my mother." He didn't look surprised. "I've seen this happen before," he said slowly. "But what makes this very interesting is your father created a contingency trust in your name 10 years ago. I blinked. "A what, exactly?" "A trust," he said. "That activates if he's declared incapacitated, or if there's credible evidence of serious financial manipulation. This document, if proven false, could absolutely trigger it." The room went still. "Would that override the current will?" I asked. "If the trust is valid, and the trigger conditions are fully met, yes," he said. "You could effectively reclaim legal control of a large portion of the estate." I left his house with hands that felt like they belonged to someone else. Shaky, but steady. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. Instead, I called a mobile notary and a handwriting analyst. I didn't want a courtroom yet, but I wanted to be ready. I wanted truth, documented, verified, prepared, like armor. Back at home, I carefully scanned every page into a secured cloud folder. I named it Bundy Archive. Just typing it made me want to vomit. That evening, as I was pouring tea, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. The transcript popped up a few seconds later. "Whatever you're digging into, please stop. You're not thinking clearly. You don't want to destroy this family." I pressed play. It was my mother's voice. Soft, measured, soothing, like a lullaby laced with poison. She was right about one thing. I didn't want to destroy the family. I just wanted them to stop destroying me. By Friday afternoon, I had all the pieces I needed, just not the will to look at them again. The handwriting analyst sent me the report digitally and confirmed it in plain, emotionless terms. The signature on the quit-claim deed exhibits significant deviations and is highly unlikely to have been written by the same individual who signed prior documents under Ronald C. Bundy. It was everything I feared, and everything I needed. I saved the file to my encrypted folder, along with scanned copies of the original trust, and the newer version that had my name erased. I named the folder Inheritance Integrity. It was the kind of name that sounded like a corporate security protocol. Maybe because I knew what I was up against wasn't just a family issue, it was coordinated, calculated. That night, I tried to cook, but ended up letting the pan smoke. My appetite was gone, replaced by a restlessness that even sleep couldn't quiet. Saturday passed in a blur. Grocery store, laundry, vacuuming the same spot on the rug 3 times. I didn't want to think, but my body knew I was preparing for something. Then Sunday morning, it came. A text from Kalista. "Mom wants brunch at Stone Cafe. Neutral ground. We should all just talk. Don't wear drama today." I stared at it for a long moment, then typed back, "I'll be there." I didn't go to make peace. I went to measure the distance between who they thought I was and who I had become. Stone Cafe in Plano had glass walls and industrial lighting, overpriced croissants and under-seasoned eggs. It wasn't my kind of place, but it was perfect for people who like to be seen. When I walked in, they were already seated. Mom wore one of her coral blazers, like she had something important to announce. Kalista stood when she saw me, arms open like we were long-lost friends. "Evie," she said, and kissed the air near my cheek. "So very glad you came today." I gave a half smile and sat down. The server brought mimosas. I declined. Conversation started with light chatter, weather, church announcements, a neighbor's new fence. But Kalista led every topic. She gestured with confidence, quoted scripture to justify some point about forgiveness, and even dropped a few humble brags about a recent charity gala. Then Mom leaned forward, touched my wrist lightly. "You'll understand someday, Evie. We never wanted you burdened with complicated property stuff. You've always been more sensitive." That word again. Sensitive. It wasn't just a word, it was a dismissal, a way to sideline me, and still sound maternal. I felt the heat rising behind my ears. I wasn't going to lose control. Not here. Not for them. I dabbed my lips with my napkin, placed it gently on the table. "I may be sensitive," I said softly, "but I'm not blind, and I'm not small. Not anymore." Their expressions froze mid-smile. I stood up, pulled out my wallet, and laid a 20 on the table for my untouched omelette. Kalista blinked. "Evie, come on. Don't be dramatic like this." I didn't look at her. Drama requires performance. I'm just done pretending this isn't real. I turned to leave, taking slow, measured steps, the kind of exit you make when silence speaks louder than slamming doors. But she couldn't help herself. "You're overreacting," Kalista called after me. "No one's honestly trying to take anything from you." I paused at the hostess stand, glanced back over my shoulder. "Funny," I said. "That's exactly what the paperwork clearly says. If your family ever dismissed your feelings and tried to erase your place, would you walk away in silence or fight back for the truth?" Comment number 1 below if you'd choose strength over silence. Outside, the air felt sharp and honest. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just walked, because I wasn't closing a chapter. I was preparing to write one, on my terms. The glass door to the clerk's office thudded shut behind me, blocking out the sounds of traffic and the hum of downtown Plano. I stood in the sterile hallway for a moment, clutching the manila envelope I hadn't meant to bring with me. Inside it were my questions, and maybe, finally, some answers. I approached the records window, gave my name, and requested copies of property transfers filed under my family's names in the past 5 years. I was prepared for stalling, but the clerk barely looked up. "Go to workstation 3. They're digitized now," she said, sliding a plastic visitor badge my way. I walked to the monitor, logged in, and began typing. The deed popped up fast, cleaner than I expected. A lakeside property, transferred from Ronald C. Bundy to Kalista L. Bundy, filed with a smiley-face notary seal at the bottom. But one detail clawed at my attention: the date. The deed had been notarized the exact same weekend Dad was in the hospital for a mild stroke. I remembered, because I had driven him there myself, sat through the CT scan waiting room, with a stale coffee and a blanket he called too pink. There was no way he'd signed anything that week. Then I noticed something else. The name of the notary service. Texas Signed Notary Remote Division. I copied the registry number, cross-checked it online. The notary was registered to a woman named Monica Varrell, Kalista's college roommate. I didn't even feel angry. Not in the explosive way people expect. What I felt was a cold shift in my bones. This wasn't just manipulation. It was fraud. I printed everything. The backdated filing, the registry info, the full deed. As I stepped out of the building into the sharp, sunlit air, a quiet voice in my head whispered, "This isn't just favoritism. This is theft." I drove straight home. It was late afternoon when I sat at my desk and unlocked the fireproof box under my bed. Inside was the old living trust document, the one Dad had asked me to store back when things were simpler. I opened it. In the event of parental retirement or death, it read in crisp, tight typeface, "All properties and assets are to pass to Avania Straoud, sole daughter and legal heir." My breath caught. I blinked, making sure I hadn't imagined it. Below the sentence was his signature, Dad's real one, not the neat, sterile scroll on the lakeside deed. This was the wide, swooping R, The deliberate C, the funny loop in the B of Bundy that he always joked looked like a number 6. I stared at it for a very long time, not out of doubt, but out of grief. It felt like hearing him again, like that time when I was 16, sitting on the back porch, sobbing because I didn't get into the college I wanted. And he whispered softly, "One day, everything will be yours. Not because you asked for it, but because you've earned every part of it." I'd forgotten how solid that promise once felt, until now. I placed the old trust next to the forged deed and pulled up a new folder on my computer. This time I labeled it Active Case Straoud. Inside it, I dropped every file: the original trust, the forged quitclaim deed, Monica Varrell's registry record, screenshots of text messages from Kalista, bank transactions for mortgage payments I'd covered, voice recordings I'd quietly saved of my mom discussing Kalista's supposed sacrifice. Then I added one last thing, a draft letter, unsigned but ready, addressed to my family's estate attorney. I didn't send it yet. I wasn't ready to open that door wide, not until I had backup. That night, as I sipped water and stared out my window at the darkening sky, my phone buzzed. A voicemail from Mom. I hit play. "Evie, please don't make such a big deal out of this. We've all moved on already. Just be grateful that Kalista's willing to manage things for everyone." It was said in that syrupy, southern-laced tone she always used, when she was trying to guilt me back into submission. But something in me stayed still and solid. "No," I whispered aloud, placing the phone screen down on the table. "Not this time." I reached for my email. I hadn't spoken to Norrell Nix in years, not since we'd worked on that Veterans Housing Initiative together. But I remembered her steel spine, her calm fire, and the way she once made a county clerk backtrack on a missing document with a single phone call. In the subject line, I typed, "Client name, Avania Straoud. Breach of trust and property fraud inquiry," and I hit send. I spent the entire night preparing, not just documents, but myself. My black folder lay open on the kitchen table, every page placed in exact order, like ammunition for a silent war. I didn't pace. I didn't cry. I reviewed, read, reread. Then I packed it up, zipped the case, and ironed my blouse until it held no wrinkles. Just like my tone would, just like my resolve already did. By noon I was in my car, pulling up to the driveway of the house I used to call home. The magnolia tree still leaned left, just slightly, like it was bowing toward the sidewalk. I noticed that the wind chime Mom loved so much had been replaced with a new one, cleaner, sharper sounding, made of glass instead of copper, like they'd decided to start fresh, without me. I parked slowly. No honk, no rush. My steps across the driveway were measured, heels firm against the cement, and when I rang the bell, it was Kalista who opened the door, already smiling like she'd won. She wore white. Not cream, not beige. White. Like this was some kind of coronation. "Glad you could finally make it," she said sweetly, stepping aside. "We're all waiting in the living room." I said nothing. Inside, the room was staged like a tribunal. Dad sat in his usual recliner, arms crossed, like this was a minor dispute he'd have to referee. Mom perched on the edge of the couch, hands neatly folded in her lap, like she was hosting a book club, not facilitating a betrayal. And there, on the coffee table, lay a folder. Not mine. Kalista reached for it the moment I sat down. "This," she said, "is just a formality, a final draft of the division agreement. It's been carefully reviewed by a third-party mediator." I held up a hand. "Before you go any further," I unzipped my case and began laying out my documents on the glass. 1, 2, 3, quietly, deliberately. Kalista's mouth twitched. "This is the original living trust," I said. "Dated 5 years ago, with both parents' full signatures." Silence. Mom shifted. Dad looked older somehow, smaller. "And this," I continued, is a notarized copy of the property deed transfer filed just last month. The notary. I slid over a highlighted printout. Registered to Monica Varel. I think you remember her very well, Kalista. No one spoke. And this letter, I said, placing the final sheet flat on the table, is from my attorney, confirming that these transactions, every single one, can be fully contested. And that fraud, especially involving forged signatures, is grounds for civil and even criminal action. Kalista's eyes narrowed. You're bluffing, completely, she snapped. I didn't flinch. Then take me to court. She scoffed, tossing her hair over her shoulder. You're vindictive, Evie. You always have been. You ran off to college and came back here thinking you were better than all of us. I tilted my head slightly. I came back because no one else was willing to remind you that I never needed your permission to exist. My voice didn't rise, but it cut. Mom gasped, not in shock, in fear. She clutched Dad's hand. He didn't squeeze back. You never said you didn't want the estate, she said softly. You were always so terribly sensitive. We thought Kalista could handle things more quietly, more compliantly, I finished. The room stilled. Just then, the phone buzzed. I clicked on speaker. Norrell's voice poured into the silence, calm as a winter lake. This is attorney Norrell Nix. If we do not have confirmation of mutual resolution by Monday, 9 o'clock in the morning, we will proceed with a formal petition for injunction and review of all assets in question. I trust that is clear. No one responded. I stood. My palms weren't sweating. My knees didn't shake. I had rehearsed every step of this moment, but I didn't need to fake it anymore. As I turned to leave, my eyes caught something on the shelf behind me. A photo frame. That old family trip to San Antonio. The photo inside showed only 3 people, Mom, Dad, and Kalista. But I remembered that day. I was there. I took the picture. I had set up the timer, propped the camera on a cooler, and run into place. I reached for the frame and popped it open. Behind the doctored image, the real photo remained folded and hidden. There I was, right there between them, grinning, arm wrapped around Dad's shoulder, sun in my eyes. They hadn't erased me completely, just tried. I refolded the picture gently and put it in my bag. What they tried to bury, the truth had quietly protected. And as I walked out, the only sound behind me was the tap of my heels on the hardwood floor. No voices, no protests, no more lies. The morning air outside the courthouse was unnaturally still, like the world itself was holding its breath. I stood on the stone steps for a beat, watching the glass doors reflect the storm I carried inside. I adjusted the folder under my arm, took one steadying breath, and walked in. The courtroom wasn't grand, no polished mahogany, no golden seals like in the movies. It was beige, bland, almost clinical, but for me, it might as well have been a battlefield. My parents were already seated, dressed in muted tones that tried to say, "We're just confused elders," while Kalista sat poised in a tailored grey blazer, like she was running a board meeting. Her smirk didn't reach her eyes today, not after what had happened in that living room. I took my seat beside Norrell, who gave me a quick nod, without looking away from her stack of prepared filings. Calm, calculated. Every word from her was like a scalpel, precise, intentional, designed to expose what lay beneath. The bailiff called the session to order. When the judge entered, even Kalista's posture stiffened. She wasn't smiling anymore. And then it began. After formalities, the judge turned to Norrell. "You may proceed now with your opening summary." Norrell stood, and without preamble, played the audio recording. My heart thudded like a slow drum beating inside my chest. The sound came through the courtroom speakers, slightly muffled, but unmistakable. Kalista's voice, laughing. Then Mom's, chiming in. Dad's, quieter, but still there. Manipulate the dumb youngest one. She will not check. She just wants to be loved always. The silence that followed was the kind that wraps around your throat. You could almost hear people blinking. The judge leaned forward. "This recording has been fully verified?" Norrell nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. Time-stamped, authenticated, and obtained completely legally by a third party who was present in the household at the time of the recording." Kalista shot to her feet. "That's completely taken out of context." "Sit down, Miss Straoud," the judge said sharply. "This court does not tolerate grandstanding here." I didn't look at her. I didn't need to, because that clip wasn't just a revelation. It was confirmation. Everything I had feared, suspected, silently carried. It had been real, and now it had been heard. My parents, they did not even turn their heads toward me. That hurt more than anything they had said. But it wasn't over. I opened my folder and pulled out one final page. "This," I said, rising to address the room, "is the part they completely forgot." Norrell handed it to the clerk, who passed it to the judge. "It's a clause written into the original family trust," I continued, "signed by my grandfather before he passed. It grants me full veto power over any family asset transfer made before I turn 35. "And when is your 35th birthday?" the judge asked, flipping through the document. 2 days from now," I answered firmly. The judge looked over his glasses. "Then, as of the day after tomorrow, the contested assets cannot be transferred without your express written consent." I could hear Kalista's breath hitch. She turned toward our parents. "You knew about this," she hissed. "Did either of you even properly read it?" Mom's face was pale. Dad rubbed his forehead like it might erase the room. But I wasn't done. From my coat pocket, I pulled something crumpled but sacred. The tiny origami crane, faded, worn at the wings. My grandfather had taught me how to fold it one quiet Sunday in his garage. Then he'd taken it, tucked it into his wallet, telling me, "You're the one with wings. Remember that. Always." It had been returned to me after his funeral. Folded inside the clause envelope, I placed it on the table. That little bird had traveled through years of silence and paper trails, and now it landed right where it was always meant to. The courtroom hushed as the judge finalized the interim ruling. Effective immediately, a freeze is placed on all transferred estate assets. Probate records will be reopened for review. A formal investigation into misuse of family funds is hereby authorized. Kalista slumped back in her chair. My mother opened her mouth, perhaps to plead, perhaps to manipulate. But the judge raised his hand. "You've had your say already." I turned to leave. As I passed them, I didn't flinch. When my father looked away, or when my mother whispered softly, "Evie, please, just listen," I stopped, just for a second. "This wasn't revenge," I said without turning around. "It was restoration, nothing more." And with that, I left. Not storming out, just walking forward, finally unburdened. The gravel crunched beneath my tires as I pulled into the driveway of my grandfather's house. No, my house now. The title deed bore my name alone, but I wasn't arriving like a victor. I wasn't here to gloat. I was here to breathe. The house still looked much the same from the outside, save for the new coat of paint and the trimmed hedges. But inside, everything felt stilled. Not empty, just full of memory, the kind that wraps around your ribs and asks if you've really healed or just learned how to carry the ache better. I let myself in and shut the door gently behind me. It was quiet, save for the faint creak of the wood floor as I walked across it. The scent of cedar still lingered, faint and warm, like the memory of a hug. I placed my keys on the entry table and ran my hand along the old bookshelf, where my grandfather used to line up his black-bound ledgers and gardening magazines. Each room still held a trace of him, a man who never raised his voice, but left echoes deep enough to carry through decades. This space had not forgotten me, even when my family had. I wandered into the kitchen, now brighter after the renovation. Marble counters, updated cabinets, but that same window above the sink, where he used to hum while rinsing tomatoes from the garden. I stood there for a moment, letting the morning light hit my face, and felt something shift. Not closure, just stillness. And in that stillness came peace, the gentle kind that lingers. The knock at the door startled me out of my thoughts. I walked back and opened it, to find Mrs. Alden, the neighbor from 2 houses down, holding a weathered envelope. "Found this tucked in the mail slot at the old church mailbox," she said, adjusting the thin scarf around her neck. "It's for you. It looks very old." I took it, my fingers already recognizing the handwriting. "My grandfather's," I whispered quietly. Back inside, I sat down on the living room armchair, the one that still creaked in the same spot it always had, and opened the envelope. The letter was dated just 5 days before he passed. His words, in careful loops, spilled across the page, like a quiet hand on my shoulder. "Evie, if you are reading this, then the winds must have shifted. I feared they might. People forget what is fair when fear gets involved. I have always known your heart. It is why I chose you. Because you would protect, not simply possess. Speak softly, but stand firmly when it matters. Sometimes justice takes time, but it always knows where to land. Love always, Papa." I folded the letter back slowly, sealing the moment into my chest like a keepsake. A quiet exhale escaped me. Not relief exactly, more like release. My phone buzzed, a voicemail from Mom. I did not press play right away, just watched the screen pulse. Then curiosity got the better of me. I listened, her voice, strained, a little softer than I remembered. "Evie, we did not know how much you meant until you walked away. Maybe we did not want to see it. I do not expect you to forgive us. I just hope you are okay, truly okay." There were no tears in my eyes, just a long, hollow breath. I wasn't angry, not anymore, but I wasn't ready to open that door again either. Some things don't need slamming to be closed. Later that afternoon, I walked upstairs to what used to be his study. I'd turned it into a reading room, with white curtains, and a shelf of books he would have loved. On the mantel, I placed something small and delicate. My folded crane. It wasn't just paper. It was the part of me they tried so hard to erase. The child who folded hope into corners, who stayed quiet because she thought love had to be earned. She lived here now, proud, whole, complete. I didn't burn bridges, but I wasn't rebuilding them either. Down the street, a group of kids raced past the gate, laughing. One girl, maybe 10, chased a paper bird twirling brightly in the breeze. I smiled, because I was no longer chasing approval anymore. Not from people who had looked right through me for years. They had given away the estate, thinking I was dispensable. But I had always been the foundation. The quiet one. The steady one. The one who knew what was worth keeping, and what needed to be let go. I stepped outside, locked the door firmly behind me, and paused. No goodbyes, no announcements, just the morning sun on my face, and a life of my own, waiting to begin. Sometimes you do not need to slam the door. Sometimes not returning is loud enough. Sometimes standing up for yourself does not mean shouting. It means walking away with your dignity fully intact. This story was never about revenge. It was about reclaiming worth after years of being overlooked. Because family does not just mean shared blood. It means mutual respect. I walked down the path toward the magnolia tree and thought of everything that had been buried under silence and denial all those years. The memories, the sacrifices, the unseen pieces of myself. And I realized none of it had been wasted. Even the pain had shaped me into someone who could stand in that courtroom and face them without trembling. I did not need them to see me anymore. I finally saw myself. That was enough. Back at the kitchen table later that evening, I unfolded my grandfather's letter once more, his handwriting looping across the page. Steady, certain, timeless. Those words were not only for me, they were for anyone who has ever been told they are too sensitive, too quiet, too much of a burden. He had trusted me because he saw beyond the noise, beyond the expectations. He believed I would stand when it mattered, and I had. So I tell you this, not as a victory speech, but as a reminder. Sometimes you have to choose yourself, even when it hurts, even when the people you love most will not understand. And when you do, you discover that freedom is not something they can give or take away. It is something you carry inside. And finally, allow yourself to live. Now, I would love to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from people you loved in order to protect your own peace? Share your thoughts and your experiences in the comments below. I want this to be a place where your voices matter, where your stories are heard. If you found something in this story that spoke to you, please like the video. Share it with someone who might need the reminder. And subscribe if you want to hear more true-to-life family stories that cut to the heart and stay with you long after they end. Drop a comment below with these words. Choose yourself. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this journey, and I hope to see you again in the next story. Until then, take care of yourself. And remember, your worth is never up for negotiation.